Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 49 of Diehlman at Halftime, the NBA podcast that tops all others. I'm your host, Larry Diehlman. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome aboard, and if you've been a loyal listener, welcome back. We have much to get to today and not a lot of time to do it. We have 5 sections that we'll get into: a general overview of the NBA this week, and our usual highlight, lowlight, random stat, and game of the week. Let's get to our content for the week. It seems like the NBA could be getting a friend soon. LeBron James's business manager and close friend Maverick Carter has been tapped by a group of private equity fund investors to raise $5 billion to create an international basketball league to rival the NBA. The proposed league would sport 6 men's and 6 women's teams and play around the world. James is reportedly not involved with these plans. The group may try to tap private equity and sovereign wealth funds. Private equity funds are limited to a 20% stake in an NBA franchise and can't serve in a governing role. The NBA-ABA merger, which gave the NBA the Indiana Pacers, Brooklyn Nets, who at one point were the New York Nets and the New Jersey Nets, the Denver Nuggets, and San Antonio Spurs, was the last time the NBA had a rival. Bad news emerged for Charlotte Hornets fans this week. Brandon Miller, the Hornets' second-year player, is out indefinitely due to a torn ligament in his right wrist. The second overall pick in the 2023 draft out of Alabama is averaging career highs across the board. This is a tough blow to Charlotte, as their chances of grabbing a low play-in tournament seed are slowly dwindling. Miller has appeared in 27 of the Hornets' 38 games this season. Lastly, Oklahoma City Thunder head coach Mark Daigneault has been tapped to coach one of the All-Star teams next month. The Thunder have the best record in the West. Daigneault is the first Oklahoma City head coach to receive a nod since Scott Brooks in 2014. A Thunder assistant coach will be the second head coach, and one Eastern Conference head coach and assistant will lead the other 2. In total, there will be 4 All-Star teams. This is part of the new pickup-style tournament for All-Star Weekend. 3 teams will be drafted by the Inside the NBA crew: Shaquille O'Neal, Charles Barkley, and Kenny the Jet Smith. The winner of the Rising Stars Challenge will comprise the 4th. This episode is entitled No Looking Back. So, who's raising eyebrows at the moment? Let's go to our highlight, the Denver Nuggets. Denver is clicking on all cylinders, as they should be. The Nuggets are 26-16 and 4th in the Western Conference. Even though the Nuggets are just below other teams in the conference like Oklahoma City, they have more experience. Nikola Jokic, the centerpiece of the team, pun intended, is arguably the best player in the NBA. Jokic is dropping 30.1 points, 13.2 rebounds, 9.9 assists, and 1.8 steals per night. He's putting up career highs in minutes, points. It's the first time he's averaging 30-plus points, and he's tied for 3rd in the league. 3-point percentage, it's the first time over 40%, and he's 2nd in the league. Assists, 2nd in the league, and steals. Jokic has a league-high 18 triple-doubles. The man is almost averaging a triple-double as a center. LeBron James is second with 8. Denver is blessed with one of the top starting 5s in the league. Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, and Michael Porter Jr. are all great options. Despite their bench unit being questionable, Russell Westbrook may have found a role here. The 36-year-old has had some double-doubles and triple-doubles in the last few games. Once the playoffs approach, the questionable bench unit might haunt them. Could they be a trade deadline dark horse? We shall see. Their next game is tomorrow, Tuesday, January 21st at 10 o'clock. They will host the Philadelphia 76ers. Let's go to our lowlight, the Minnesota Timberwolves. A lot can happen in the span of 8 months, especially to a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves are 22 and 20 and 8th in the West. It's interesting to see Minnesota literally in the middle of the pack in the West, given they're coming off a conference finals appearance. One major reason is the Karl Anthony Towns trade to New York. The main pieces of the transaction were Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. However, Anthony Edwards is the team's leader, averaging 26.1 points, which is his career high, 5.8 rebounds, and 4.3 assists per game. He's also hitting 42.9% of his triples. This is the first time he's hitting over 40%. Even in Towns' absence, Rudy Gobert is a four-time Defensive Player of the Year winner in the paint. He even won it last year. Players like Mike Conley, Jaden McDaniels, and current Sixth Man of the Year Naz Reid are solid in the rotation. One could argue that maybe the Timberwolves haven't meshed together yet. Another argument is the rise of other teams in the conference like Houston and Memphis. I'd be shocked if this team can't win at least one playoff series later in the spring. Their next game is today, Monday, January 20th at 2:30 p.m. They will be in Memphis to play the Grizzlies. To get more insight into our low light this week, we have our third guest on Diehlman at Halftime Season 2. Let's get into it. So for our third guest of Season 2 on the Diehlman at Halftime podcast, we welcome Danny Ryan. Danny is a multimedia specialist at Rowan University and a radio producer at 97.3 ESPN FM South Jersey, which is based in Northfield. Formerly, he was also a producer at 94.1 WIP in Philadelphia. Danny has a sports communication and media degree from Rowan University with a minor in marketing. Additionally, he served as sports director for Rowan Radio 89.7 WGLS FM. Danny, how we doing today?
Doing great, Larry. It's great to be back here on Diehlman at halftime, and that was quite the intro. You never fail to hype me up, but yeah, it's great to be back and great to talk to you. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. And how can I not hype up my guests? I mean, they make the podcast
Right.
run, so why not? All right, so Danny, I want to get your thoughts on the Minnesota Timberwolves. They're our low light this week. They're sitting in the play-in tournament seeds, a little bit of a down year so far. So my first question for you. Were you surprised at the Karl Anthony Towns trade back in October, especially right before the start of the season? And what do you think Minnesota's front office saw that made them pull the trigger on this kind of a trade?
I honestly was, Larry. I mean, I saw this trade and it looked like two teams making a trade simply just to make a trade. Now, obviously, that has panned out. That trade has panned out more for the New York Knicks than it has the Minnesota Timberwolves. The T-Wolves, as you mentioned, kind of slumping. They're just hovering around 500. And so I really didn't think it made any sense for either side, to be honest with you. I thought Dante DiVincenzo was a great chemistry piece over there in New York, not to mention what he can do from beyond the arc. He really came out of his shell last year and showed that he could be a contributing guard in this league, a starting guard, honestly. And that's part of the reason I think he wanted out and part of the reason they traded him from New York. But really on Minnesota's side, why would you trade Karl Anthony Towns? Now I know he has his limitations defensively. He does. I mean, there's no beating around that bush. But the guy is money from beyond the arc. He can shoot the lights out of the three ball. He can play bully ball down low if you need him to. Sure, he might be defensive liability from time to time, but that's why you have the two-time, three-time defensive player of the year and Rudy Gobert. I assume the Timberwolves said, they got a call from the Knicks. The Knicks were saying, hey, Dante wants out. We told him he's not going to be the starter after making trades. Do you want him? And what would it take to get Karl Anthony Towns? And they said, all right, we'll take Dante DiVincenzo and throw in Julius Randle. Maybe he can, fill the absence of Karl Anthony Towns as far as a big man playing bully ball and then stretching the floor. And we'll give you Cat straight up. I truly think that's how it went down. And I honestly don't think it made sense for either side still, but with how many pieces the Knicks added in the offseason on top of that trade as well, I mean, obviously they're clicking on all cylinders. But yeah, definitely a head scratcher as far as Minnesota. I assume they just wanted a shooter. You had Mike Conley, you had Ant Edwards, McDaniels, but none of those guys are really pure sharps. So they wanted a shooter to, put around Anthony Edwards as well as McDaniels. And I guess they just assumed that Julius Randle could fill that spot that Cat was holding.
Yeah, some good points there. And actually, we had our friend Lloyd on a couple weeks ago. We all remember
That
our good
guy.
friend Lloyd Wilson. Totally not a biased Knicks fan or anything. But when I
No.
asked him about the trade, he said he and some of his friends, like, they were excited about the Mikal Bridges acquisition, but when they got Cat, it was like pump the brakes. Like, it's good, but it's interesting. So he was a little
Right.
surprised by that. And obviously, from my perspective, it was definitely a surprise. I thought Cat was going to retire in Minnesota, but I mean, he is from around here.
Hmm.
He's from Edison, New Jersey. He was wearing Eagles gear at the game,
Yes.
the Sixers Knicks game. So I mean, that is like a suicide mission in Philadelphia. But yeah.
So, real quick question. I didn't get a chance to catch most of that game. I caught the end because it got close. Why did he come out in the second half with, I guess it was a Knicks, dress up shirt on? Was he getting booed because he was wearing the Eagles shirt in Wells Fargo Center?
Yeah, I think the fans were booing him a little bit, or the Knicks fans behind the bench were just like, "Bro, what are you doing?" So
Yeah,
maybe he was like, "All right, I showed my Eagles support. Now I got to put on the Knicks uniform."
right. Hey,
So
Jalen Brunson said he was behind him wearing the Eagles stuff. So that's two Eagles fans right there on the Knicks, and then you had a third in Macau. I mean, it is
yeah,
Philadelphia up the turnpike right there.
if Tom Thibodeau comes out as an Eagles fans, they're in trouble.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, some good points there. So my second question, Anthony Edwards is somehow already in his fifth season. His numbers are pretty similar to last year, nothing too crazy or anything, roughly about 25 a game. How many more seasons do you think it'll take for him to enter his prime, or is he already there at age 23?
I truly do think he is in his prime. I mean, he's still so young, but when you're averaging, 26, 6, and 4 with about a steal and a half a game, those are pretty good numbers, especially for a guy on the Timberwolves who, we talked about it. They haven't been clicking on all cylinders this season. Not quite sure what's wrong with them, whether it's coaching, whether it's, the chemistry between the players, or quite frankly, they just don't know how to play with each other yet. We're not even halfway through the season. Not sure what it could be, but for him to, kind of battle through all of that adversity and the sloppy play, the clunky play they're exhibiting out there on the court, and not only put up the same numbers, but improve his 3-point percentage from 35.7 to 42.3 so far. I think he is in his prime. Now, I will say, I do think he can take another step. I think he could honestly average above 30 points per game if called upon, but there's so many other guys on that team that need the ball. When you see 30-point per game scorers like a James Harden or even a Joel Embiid, typically there's not solidified stars on that team with them. And now I don't want to, call Julius Randle a stud or anything, but he needs the ball a lot. He needs it for majority of the game to be able to work down low. Dante DiVincenzo obviously needs the ball a lot to be able to space the floor. So well, I do think he's in his prime, but I think he really could take a next step if he was called upon or was asked to do so.
Yeah, some good points, and like you said, with like a Joel Embiid or just the Timberwolves in general, like you have a good lineup over there. Like we know at this point in his career, Rudy Gobert ain't getting 20 points a game. That's
Right.
crazy. Mike Conley's almost 40 years old. Forget about it.
Mhm.
So pretty much, yeah, like Edwards and Randall are going to be your two primary guys, and I think Anthony Edwards, the fact he's only 23, yeah, he could take a next step, which is scary enough, but
Yeah, and
especially
then two
now.
solid role players and Jaden McDaniels and DiVincenzo too. So it's again, you made some great points there. I do think that he's definitely in his prime as far as a young man goes. I mean, again, you mentioned it, 23. To average those numbers at 23, it's kind of hard to say he's not in his prime, but I'm really curious to see what he's able to do with grown man strength when he gets 28, 29, 30, and how good he can be then.
And now you're subtracting Cat from the Timberwolves, and he's good for about 25 a game. So Anthony Edwards, I think, will step up in the near future. So next, Minnesota is in a tight-seated race in the Western Conference standings. Like we said earlier, they're hovering in the play-in tournament, which is not where they probably should be. Their next five games, oh boy, at Grizzlies, at Mavericks, versus Nuggets, versus Hawks, and at Suns. What'll their record be in that stretch? And do you think they can at least tread water in the play-in tournament seeds for now?
It's a great question. And I honestly have to do some research real quick just to be able to answer that question because it says Dante DiVincenzo is out. I'm wondering how long he's going to be out for. It seems like he's day to day, so that shouldn't be too much of a
Okay.
problem. I mean, those are some pretty tough matchups, but I could see them going either way. A lot of talented guys on both teams. Let's see, Grizzlies, Mavericks, Nuggets, Hawks, and Suns. Suns could still be good at times, but obviously they are not playing their best basketball right now. Benching, what's the guy with their center's name over in
Yusuf
Phoenix? Not
Nurkic.
Vucevic, Yusuf
Nurkic.
Nurkic. That's right, and then Bradley Beal as well. So I'm gonna say they go. I'll say 2-3 in that stretch. I see losses even without Luka. The Mavericks are playing well. I see losses to the Mavericks. I see losses or a loss to the Nuggets. I think they beat the Hawks and the Suns, and I see a loss to the Grizzlies too.
Yeah, that's kind of a tough stretch. The Grizzlies, Mavericks, and Nuggets are all kind of like bang, bang, bang in the top of the West. The Hawks, we know they're decent. They're middle of the road. No matter what, they'll put
Right.
up literally they're the definition of mid. And Phoenix
Yes.
has been Phoenix has been struggling a little bit, and they're in the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes. So
Oh,
I don't know where that money's coming from over there in Phoenix, but we'll see how that works out. And I think they can at least keep their
yeah.
head above water in the meantime.
And to answer your second question real quick too, I do think they can tread water in the play-in tournament seeds for now. I mean, that's kind of what they've been doing all season long, just treading water, staying around 500, and barring a drastic injury to an Anthony Edwards or a Julius Randle, I think they can continue to do that and find themselves in the play-in or maybe just one or two seeds above the play-in. The West is so close, and really, it's kind of a I don't know if I want to say it's a poor product in the NBA right now, where if just all these teams are so evenly balanced, I'm going to go and say it's a poor product and hedge on that side of things. But I do think they can compete with honestly a weak West in my opinion.
Yeah, some good points there. And I'm actually going to look at the standings right now. Where do things lie in the West? As you probably know, and a lot of fans know, the West, the 3 to like the 11 seed is always like 3 games apart, and then in the East,
Right.
it's like it's a free for all. So
Hmm.
in the West right now, the difference between the 10 seed is the last seed in the play-in tournament, up to the 4 seed is separated by 4 games. The play-in tournament 7 through 10 in the West is separated by a game and a half.
Wow.
So yeah,
A lot of
definitely.
mid basketball being played on the West Coast.
Yeah, it's going to get interesting as the season keeps going. So to wrap things up, the Timberwolves upset the Nuggets in the Western Conference semifinals last season before losing to the Mavericks. Is their current core built to make a deep run again, and should they utilize the upcoming trade deadline?
With the core as it is right now, I truly don't think they can make a deep run. Maybe get out of the first round, give their opponent in the second round some sort of competition, a little bit of fight, but they're just, unless they really figure out how to play sound basketball together, I don't think they can make any sort of run in the playoffs. And as far as utilizing the trade deadline, it's a weird trade deadline, Larry. Like you look at these pieces that are out there, the biggest names on the trade market. Jimmy Butler, you mentioned him. That's going to be a whole saga. He's full of drama right now. Pat Riley doesn't want to trade him. Jimmy Butler went to Pat Riley's office and said, I want to be traded. Get me out of here. They're refusing and hesitating to do so. So we'll see if that turns into anything. As you mentioned, the Suns have interest in him, rumored to have interest in him. Then you take a look at these other pieces. I mean, Zach LaVine, I don't think he fits well on the Timberwolves. Bradley Beal, maybe, but what is he right now? He's getting benched over in Phoenix, and he has a no trade clause. So will he even want to go to Minnesota? And then you take a look at the two pieces the Pelicans have, or I mean, if you want to throw DeJounte Murray in there, who they just traded for, three pieces: Zion, Brandon Ingram, and DeJounte Murray. None of those names really stand out to me as, oh yeah, just throw that in the Timberwolves lineup and they're gonna, that player's gonna fix all of their problems. I think maybe the best fit on this list would be a guy like Bradley Beal, can give you just a little bit of defense. Obviously, can space the floor, be an ISO scorer if you need him to, kind of the running mate for Anthony Edwards. But honestly, none of these pieces really fit the puzzle for the Minnesota Timberwolves, in my opinion. At least fit it perfectly.
Yeah, some good points there. I can't believe like, and I've written about it before. I don't know how Bradley Beal has a no trade clause. I think LeBron's the only other guy in the league who has one. I'm like, what kind of sorcery did your agent pull in order to get a no trade clause? I think probably from when he was on the Wizards, number one. And
Yeah.
yeah, the Jimmy Butler saga has just been ongoing for weeks and probably months now. Like the fact that you're driving away another star, and we've seen Pat Riley, with the whole LeBron thing and Wade and Butler. Is there like a pattern here? Are you just driving everybody out? Like the fact that Jimmy Butler wants out of a beach town, Miami, Florida, like it's crazy. But you
Yeah,
never
it's
know.
baffling.
You never know. Would Jimmy Butler go back to the Timberwolves or the Suns? You never know. But definitely some good points there. Danny, thank you for hopping on the podcast. Great talking to you. We'll get you back on soon.
Great talking to you too, Larry. Thank you for having me. And this is not really popular to say these days, but go Sixers.
Yes, sir. Let's go over to our random stat. With the NBA trade deadline closing in, two teams got a head start. On Wednesday, the Charlotte Hornets traded center Nick Richards and a second-round pick to the Phoenix Suns for Josh Okogie and 3 second-round picks. In Richards' Phoenix debut, he dropped 21 points on 7 of 8 shooting and 11 rebounds off the bench. He's now the first Sun in franchise history to have a double-double of at least 20 points and 10 rebounds off the bench. How's that for a new chapter? Richards spent his first 4.5 seasons in the Queen City after being drafted late in the second round in 2020. With the exception of last year, he's been mostly used as a reserve. He was averaging career highs 1.3 assists and 1.2 blocks per game this season with Charlotte in 21 minutes per contest. The Suns made this trade to beef up their front court. Jusuf Nurkic, who has been their starting center, was recently benched alongside guard Bradley Beal. Nurkic has been a massive liability. Richards brings defense and an injection of youth. He's 3 years younger than Nurkic. Richards is under contract through next season, so the Suns have plenty of time to decide if he's part of their long-term plans. For now, so far, so good. Finally, let's go to Game of the Week. For this week's Game of the Week, let's try the Boston Celtics at LA Clippers. This game is on Wednesday, January 22nd at 10:30 p.m. Even with this being a twice-a-year matchup due to being non-conference opponents, it'll still be a good primetime game. Boston and LA last faced off on November 25th in Beantown. The Celtics smacked the Clippers 126-94. The Clippers have momentum from last week by bludgeoning Brooklyn by 59 points and Portland by 29 points. Boston had a tough couple of days versus weaker opponents. The Celtics are expected to repeat as champions this season. Meanwhile, the Clippers have been making themselves known in the Western Conference. James Harden is doing James Harden things. Norman Powell is thriving with Paul George gone and with Kawhi Leonard being injured/being away with his family. Behind Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, Boston will always be tough. Boston's Joe Mazzulla and LA's Ty Lue are championship-proven coaches. I'm going with the Celtics to complete the sweep, 120-110. Well, that's all the time we have for today. If you haven't already, make sure to follow me on social media. I have 2 X or Twitter accounts and 2 Instagram accounts. The podcast accounts are under @Diehlman_NBA for both X and Instagram. My personal X account is @LarryDiehlman18 and my personal Instagram is @Mr_Sports18. They're also in the description on Buzzsprout, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you to Danny Ryan for being our guest this week on the podcast. Remember, you can follow him on Twitter @DannyRye02, that is Danny RY02, and on Instagram @DannyRyan_. And don't forget to spread the word about Diehlman at halftime. And just a quick note, be sure to tune in, especially for next week, as we will be celebrating a certain milestone. See you next time, fellow Hoops fans.